So welcome to today's Harlow's Office Hours. For those of you that don't know me yet, I'm Samantha Anderl. I'm co-founder of Harlow. And for those of you who don't know a lot about Harlow, Harlow is an all-in-one freelance tool and community to help freelancers grow thriving businesses. So we really help with everything from pitch to paid and beyond. We also have Andrea here, who is my co-founder, and Maddie from the Harlow team, who's our amazing community manager. They're both with us today to say hello and field questions as we go. Before we dive in, I'm going to go over some housekeeping items, okay? Just to let you know what to expect. So this is going to be a 45-minute Q&A. It's all about outsourcing to grow your business. I know that's broad. We'll cover a lot of topics here today. So John Doherty is with us. John is a former consultant, marketer, and CEO and founder of EditorNinja. I'm going to hand over to John in a couple of minutes to go kind of deeper into that and tell you more about himself. But before we do that, just letting you all know this is going to be a recorded session. So for anyone that couldn't make it today, or anyone that you feel would benefit from tuning in, we can send the link out afterwards and you'll all have access to this. So we have a handful of questions that were sent over in advance. We'll start with those to kick things off. But if you have any questions during the Q&A, go ahead and drop them in the chat or just raise your hand and we'll let you chime in. You are welcome to participate in whatever way feels most comfortable to you. So if you want to speak up, feel free. If you'd rather type something out, feel free to do that too. Either way is totally fine. John, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you tell this crew a little bit more about yourself.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for that intro, Sam. I appreciate it. So as Sam said, my name is John Doherty. I am a serial entrepreneur. So I've started 3 six-figure service companies since 2015. So almost 8 years now here in just a couple of months. I have generated a ton of leads for marketing agencies via my other company, Credo. And then EditorNinja has been my recent focus. And I just looked, we are 41 words shy of 3 million edited in the last 18 months. So if anyone wants to go submit 41 words, I will love you forever.
I'm on it.
So
I'm on
my
it.
background, all right, Sam's on it. Great. My background is as a marketer, as an SEO. I did SEO professionally for many years. I don't even know how many, but I started in about 2008, stopped doing consulting and mostly doing consulting into 2018, done a little bit since then. But I worked agency side for a couple agencies, most notably Distilled in New York City. I was the first hire in their New York City office after the Tom, who moved over from the UK to start it. And then I went in-house with Zillow for a couple of years and ran SEO content growth for a couple of their nationwide brands, and then went out on my own and, I've kind of built companies since then. So I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I'm a front-end developer. I'm a marketer. I'm a writer. The only thing I don't do is design, but I married a designer, so we're good to go there. And also I am, in the last number of years, my superpower has kind of become hiring, because I've just come to recognize that I can hire people who are way more affordable than I am, or I think of myself as, who have skills that I don't have, who love doing things that I hate. And so overall, that is my goal, and that is how I've grown my companies. At Credo, the largest the team has ever been is 9. It's a little bit smaller than that now. And at EditorNinja, we currently have, it's myself and 7 editors. So one of those editors is more of an operations managing editor, kind of handling the workflow of assigning documents that are submitted by customers to their editor, QAing it, returning it, etc. But I've built our own software, kind of workflow software that facilitates all of that. So I do all the things, but I love hiring. I love talking about hiring. I am firmly convinced that the best way to grow usually is via hiring, but you have to do it correctly. So I'm here to share my knowledge.
I love it. And John and I have we've known each other for 9 years now. So back when you were at
Something
Zillow,
like that.
I think I was at Campaign Monitor. And so it's really fun because we've both seen each other start these various businesses and go through our careers together and seen how we've grown businesses and shifted and hired. So I'm super pumped to be having this conversation here with him today. So we're going to dive in. And I know, John, you just mentioned that you've gone through, starting a number of businesses, right? And whether that's consulting businesses, whether it's service businesses, whatever it is. When did you first start considering outsourcing? So as a solopreneur, as somebody who's, starting their own business from scratch, when do you think people should consider outsourcing?
So I think there's a couple of ways to answer this question. The first one is it kind of starts with knowing yourself and knowing what you're really good at and what you enjoy and also what you don't. For a business under, even a freelance business under 10K a month, something like that, I don't really recommend outsourcing, simply because you're cutting into your margin so much that you're most likely just going to let that person go pretty quickly. That said, I do, I think there are definitely ways to outsource earlier on. FreshBooks or a Harlow subscription is, way cheaper than hiring an accountant and that sort of thing. I definitely recommend hiring a tax accountant as a self-employed individual. But really, once you get above about 10, 15K a month in revenue, that's when everything starts to get really busy, is what I found. And so you're working a ton of hours. You're doing a lot of things that you don't really know well, once you learn them, you realize that you don't really love them. Yeah. Sometimes you actually hate them. So my kind of framework for considering when to outsource is basically do it as soon as you can afford to do so, and outsource things that are core to the business that you hate, that you don't like, or that needs like a trained eye, like accounting or something like that. So things like accounting, payroll, even marketing potentially. Probably not sales. I think for most freelancers, like, you should be the one doing the selling, but you also don't have to be the one doing the delivering. So at EditorNinja, for example, or even at Credo, I believe it was about 2-3 years in that I hired someone on a part-time basis, hired a few people on a part-time basis to basically do all the lead qualification, introduce to agencies, that sort of thing. But I still did the account management. Over the years, revenue grew enough that I was able to hire a full-time person that also did account management, that sort of thing. And now I'm basically stepped back from the day-to-day of that business. So, was able to actually fully replace myself. But at EditorNinja, I am not an editor. I'm a writer. So I've had to outsource. I've had to delegate to two editors, and then pretty quickly got the managing editor in place, and he's part-time as well. So that I didn't have to, every single day show up and, 7 a.m. I'm assigning documents to editors, and at noon I'm QAing documents and sending them back to customers. At the end of the day, I'm assigning documents that came in during the day to editors, all that sort of thing. I don't handle any of that, right? Which frees me up to do things like this, to do marketing, to do sales, that kind of thing, to go on a walk in the middle of the day if I want to, right? I have that freedom in my calendar these days. But I will say, though, the first thing to consider outsourcing is your inbox, scheduling, calendar. So hiring an assistant, hiring a virtual assistant, part-time virtual assistant. My virtual assistant, or just assistant, I think is what we should call them, just because we live in a remote world now, right? I mean, look, we're all working from home. Just hiring an assistant that can handle those sorts of things. Mine lives in El Salvador. I pay $800 a month. Via a service that basically recruited her for me. And I get 20 hours a week of her time. I get 3 to 4 hours a day of their time. So, you can also, you don't have to go hire full time. You can outsource, things like this pretty easily, pretty cost effectively. And really the goal is to get these things off of your plate so you can focus on higher leverage activities, which we're going to get into further. But also the goal is to buy back your time, and then take that time and apply it towards things that are higher leverage, that you're great at, that you love doing, which is ultimately how the business is best going to grow.
Absolutely.
So quick question. Sorry, I want to interject because I am curious about this, specifically like outsourcing your calendar and your inbox.
Yeah.
It's something that I struggle with, because it's like, oh, but are they going to know what to do? And it feels like giving up so much control. How do you even structure that with your assistant in terms of how they're to manage your inbox and your calendar?
Yep. It is definitely a control thing. It is something that I've had to learn over the years. Basically, my assistant keeps my calendar the way I've kind of worked it over the years. And I highly recommend reading Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time. I actually learned my process for hiring and delegating and all of that from him. Basically, I see Claire is mentioning SOPs. I have certain, one of my old assistants actually put together a document about me and how to manage my inbox, how to manage my calendar, information about, my family and birthdays and all that sort of stuff. So there's literally a guide to John that each assistant that I hire gets. But for me, it's they manage my inbox. So they then put anything that I need to look at, they're putting that into a specific folder that I look at. So that becomes my inbox, but they handle getting everything else out of there, anything I don't need to see. If they have a question on it, they put it to me. If it's something that like, hey, do you want to have a meeting with this person or not? Instead of them saying, hey, do you want to meet with so-and-so? They're like, hey, there's an email from, someone that looks legit. It's not a guest post pitch or something like that. Take a look at it. And then basically I handle the back and forth. Or if I'm reaching out to someone, I handle the back and forth. And then when it comes to sending the calendar invite, that kind of thing, then we use Trello, and I will forward that email to my assistant's Trello board, which is things to do. And I'll just say, can you please schedule this meeting with so-and-so? And then they take care of it for me. One other thing that we do that really helps is we have a review at the start of the week and at the end of the week. So basically it's what's coming up this week on Monday, and then other projects they might not be aware of that I'm going to need their help on. And at the end of the week, we look back at, all right, what did we do this week? Is there anything that like was a waste of my time and I shouldn't do anymore? And then we look forward to the next week, and then we can be proactive, about that. So we have a couple different ways. It's the folder in my email. There's Trello boards. They also put stuff onto my Trello board, things they need me to do, which is awesome. And they'll bug me about it too. I asked them to bug me about it. I'm like, you're not bugging me, actually. You're just like making me get things done, which is great because I'm an ADHD all over the place founder, so I need someone who has, I like to say when I'm hiring an assistant, they have checklists about their checklists, like they're that organized. So that's kind of where we start. And also just your quick question about, are they going to know how to manage your inbox and your calendar from the start? No. You have to train them. So you have to show them, all right, these are the things I need. These are the things that I don't need. Right. And it's going to take the first month, 2 months, something like that for them to really get up to speed and to learn kind of what's important, what's not, that kind of thing. But then after that, they're rocking and rolling. So that's how I do it personally.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
Yeah. Good.
Awesome. So you mentioned very briefly that you used a service to find your most recent assistant. Yep. And I would love to dig a little bit more in there, because what I hear a lot from freelancers is they're like, okay, I want to bring on subcontractors. I want to bring on a VA. How do I do it? Where do I find them? What does that look like? How do I even start?
Yeah, it's a big question, and something that I got wrong many times before I started getting it right. So following, Dan's buyback principle, basically when it comes to deciding who to hire, it starts with, basically, can you outsource something for significantly less? Like he says 25%. I kind of put it more in like the 30 to 40%. So if I'm making $100 an hour, can I hire someone for $30 an hour? I mean, ideally it would be like $20 an hour, $25 an hour. Right. But which for a lot of people is great income. I think as like personally, when I'm doing SEO consulting, I can charge multiple hundreds an hour, and I'm like, oh man, I can't pay someone multiple hundreds an hour. They don't need to get paid multiple hundreds an hour. For a lot of people, 20, 25, 30 an hour is an amazing income for them. So don't put your own limitations on them. But for me, I kind of think about it a couple different ways. Number one is if you've decided that you're going to hire an assistant, right? And you can pay them $15 an hour, $20 an hour, whatever that is, work from home, that kind of thing. There's a few different ways that you can do it. First of all, you can source them yourself. So you can either put up a job rec, put it on LinkedIn, you can pay to promote it on different sites. And kind of depends on how big your business is. Like at Credo, doing 40, 50, 60K a month, I basically go and I pay, $500 to $1,000 to promote a position to different sites. We work remotely in Career Contessa and places like that to get a wide variety of applicants, to get a diverse variety of applicants, because I believe we have to go and actually prioritize that, and then use an applicant tracking system to basically to sort through the resumes. I actually have my assistant sort through the resumes and move them on to the next level, and then I take a look at it, and then we basically have a process there. That's mainly for full-time people, though. For part-time people, especially like part-time virtual assistants, that kind of thing, it can often be easiest, especially with like an assistant, to hire them through a service that specializes in it. And there are a bunch of different services out there. Mine is they specialize in helping U.S. companies hire El Salvadorian employees. So it's super cost effective because their cost of living is a lot less. But if you're going to hire, like there are some services that it's like you can hire military wives. I forget what it's called. But they're multiples of what I pay. But they're in the US, they're highly trained, they're professional at what they do. I mean, they're like military wives and moms. And so like they have to be super organized. I love hiring stay-at-home moms, by the way, just because they're super organized, they're super communicative. They, they're, yeah, it just works out really well. But yeah, that's kind of how I start. And then the whole like vetting of them and that kind of thing is a whole nother level. And we can kind of get into that. But that's kind of where I start with looking at who, how do I find the right people? Too many people just go like, oh, I'm looking to hire someone. Hey, friends, do you know who do you know? And I just find that doesn't really work well. You can go and, source them yourself. Like at EditorNinja, when we have a customer come in that has a specific need, like we were working with a large marketplace and updating a lot of content for SEO for them. I didn't have anyone on staff that could do it. I did the pilot project, but then I needed to hire people. So once again, I was out of delivery, so I could focus on marketing, sales, etc. So I actually went and sourced them. In that case, I used Superpath, which is a content marketing community. I think that's where I found them through, but I tested out 5, 6, 7 different potential contractors, paid them all for the work that they did, but ended up hiring 2 actually from there. So I sourced them myself through there and kind of put them through our set vetting process. So there's kind of like the lean back, like, hey friends, who do you know? And then there's the like go and search for them and who's actually done it before. So yeah, that's kind of how I approach it.
Awesome. I'm going to name drop one other service too for finding virtual assistants, which is she'sagiven.com. Actually, a pal of mine, Emily, she actually specializes in helping whether you're a solopreneur or a small business owner actually go out and find the right virtual assistant for you. So she has like a vetting call. She like matches you very much like Credo does with agencies and people looking to hire them. So that's also a really great service to check out. Okay, so we talked.
Great shout. I hadn't heard about them. Thank you.
Yeah, she is really, really awesome. Okay, so
Awesome.
you touched on this briefly about, going through and having to hire like 5 different contractors, try them all out, really figure out kind of who fits your business. So I want to kind of go into like mistakes that people make when bringing on subcontractors or virtual assistants, especially when they're hiring maybe for the first time. Like talk to us a little bit about what you've experienced and maybe how to avoid some of those mistakes, if avoidable.
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely a bunch, and some of them are avoidable, some of them are not. But there's a few things. Number one, and we touched on this with the question about, are they going to know how to manage my inbox, my calendar, and that kind of thing? And that is too often people, especially people who are not super experienced with hiring, they will basically bring someone on and be like, all right, go do it. And they're like, I don't know what to do, right? So you have to train them. Not training them is one of the most common mistakes I see. You have to let them know if they're a writer and they're subcontracting for you, you have to let them know here are the expectations around length and keyword usage and tone and voice and when it needs to be submitted by and all of these sorts of things, right? Train them on the workflow system that you use. It seems like everyone has built their own like workflow system in like Asana or Trello or wherever. I build mine in software. Like everyone has kind of built their own, but you actually have to train them on the tools that you use, because even if they've used Trello a lot, they might not know your Trello setup. So you have to train them in that. Another one that I see is not hiring people with experience. So going really like cut rate and going junior, that usually ends up, unless you have a long time horizon and a lot of patience, and your clients do too, especially if you're subcontracting work, it doesn't really end up working out well. So hire people with experience, even if it's just a year or two of professional writing experience, can make a big difference over someone that has had like one client that they've done some writing for. And then along with that, to take it even a step further, is not hiring people with experience at your type of business that is at your stage. So there are some people that work really well. Like I worked, for Zillow, for a publicly traded company. We went from 600 to 2,400 people when I was there. In the 2 years I was there, that included a big acquisition of their biggest rival. The company I was at I was number 18 and we grew to about 60 in those years. So like I've seen that like early-ish stage growth. I've also worked, I've started my own companies and built them up to, 8, 10, 12 people. Yeah, it's, and this is regardless of like, if you're hiring a subcontractor, you're hiring someone full time. you need to find people. You're hiring an agency, find the people, find the entities, organizations, whatever, that have that have experience doing the thing that you need, SEO, blog writing, whatever, editing, with the type of business that you are. So not like e-commerce or SaaS, but also in your vertical, and then also at your stage. So early stage, late stage, whatever that is, because people that are used to working at early stage, they're going to be like if your process is a little bit all over the place, they're going to be a lot more forgiving than someone that's like, I've worked for only companies that have over 2,500 people. And like, I need I need someone that is like on call for when my keyboard breaks to get me a new, like all that sort of stuff. Like small companies don't have that luxury, right? So you need people that really understand that. Then just another quick, a couple more things just real quick are, number one is not setting expectations with them about what success looks like. So I kind of talked about that already with style guides and like that kind of thing, but you have to give them expectations about what it means to succeed. That also lets you hold them accountable. And if they're not meeting those or not able to meet those, even after, repeatedly being like, hey, I need you to do this, that gives you a really good out to let them go and to find someone new. Another big mistake that people make that I've made before is hiring people to do new things, not to do things that are already working. So I'm a big believer in replacing yourself or delegating stuff that's already going, as opposed to hiring someone, to build out a brand new like Google Ads campaign, for your company. You can do that, but I personally have been taking the approach of hiring a coach that can like coach me through it. So like I can do it. And then once it's working, then I can hire someone to actually take it and run with it and do it better. But hiring someone to do new things just doesn't really work well. And then just the last two are the last one really is not measuring results. You need to hold them accountable, but then also are the numbers going in the right direction? Right. And are you actually like taking that time that you're buying back, and are you using that for, things that are, higher leverage, like marketing, sales, that kind of thing. And and also holding yourself accountable to that as well. Because I see too many entrepreneurs, and I've been guilty of this in the past myself, is they'll hire someone to buy back their time, but then they're not going and taking that time. They're basically just not working. But they should take that time and go put it into higher leverage activities that are going to continue to grow the business. And also it's okay to not have your business be growing. And, if you have an insane profit margin and like, you're working 80 hours a week and you have a crazy profit margin, spending $1,000, $2,000, a month to buy back 30 hours of your time, that's probably going to be worth it for you to take that like personal income, that profit hit, in order to, to work way less and actually be able to see your family and go on trips and that kind of thing. So those are the main mistakes that I see people making. Obviously there's a lot of them there. So there's a lot of like, pitfalls to avoid.
Yeah, that was a great list. I think a couple of the ones that stood out to me specifically was finding somebody who is used to working with the same type of clients at the same type of company. I think that was really big. When Andrea and I were running our consulting business interimly, all we did was work with early stage companies to help them get up and running. But with early stage companies, with tech startups, there were constant shifts in strategy, and Andrea and I have worked at a number of startups. And so we were used to this constant shift in strategy. But when we'd bring on a subcontractor that was not used to kind of like the ups and downs and the roller coaster of startup life, it could be really difficult for them to, we're like, okay, yes, you were working on this project, but we're deprioritizing that and we're actually shifting to this project because the business goals have shifted, right? And so it is really important to find somebody who understands the way certain types of businesses work. So I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just think the second part about setting,
and if I can just kind of real,
yeah,
go ahead.
No, please.
I was just going to say, and sometimes you don't really know that until after you've hired them, unfortunately. Like we've had some editors come work for us that they just needed, they were just really uncomfortable with any uncertainty. And it just didn't work out, right? We started working with them. They were a great editor. They're like, their work product was fantastic, but they also it wasn't successful for them, long-term, or for both of us long-term, simply because they they weren't able to work with uncertainty. Hang on, my dog is eating my trash. I'll be right back.
Well, I think uncertainty is a great word to bring up in general, because I think whether you're a solopreneur or whether you're a small business and you're going after those first couple of hires, whether it's a subcontractor or virtual assistant, those people have to be okay with some uncertainty. And that's really hard, but like you're an entrepreneur starting a small business and there's a lot of uncertainty for you. So whoever you bring on board, they have to be okay with uncertainty too. And I think that goes back, you were talking about setting expectations, and that's one of those expectations to set, right? Is like, hey, I'm trying to grow this business, and here's my plan, and here's where I'm heading. But there's a lot of uncertainty when you're in a 1 to 5 person business, and the people that are joining you have to really understand that. So I love that.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, something that you've touched on briefly in a couple of answers, but we haven't gone into specifically is, if you're a solopreneur and you're just bringing on your first assistant or you're bringing on your first subcontractor, you really have to go back and reassess your pricing, right? So you're not going to charge the same that you charged. You're probably not going to charge the same hourly rate, the same project rate. So how would you recommend, a solopreneur or a small business owner going back and assessing their pricing when they start hiring?
Oh man,
that's a loaded question.
Yeah. It's a really good question though. So there's a few things that, first of all, you need to understand before you even go to hire. The first one is, what's your current profit margin, right? So if you're charging, and often if you're a solo person, kind of working out your own effective hourly rate, it's like, okay, how much, if you're making 10,000 a month, but you're working 200 hours, working 200 hours a month, what's that number? It's $50 an hour, right? You might say like, oh yeah, I charge 125, but your effective hourly rate is actually $50 an hour. So you actually really need to know what that is. And then, that's where the, percentage of your hourly rate, your actual hourly rate, is, that's what that comes into play for hiring. Another one to know is, and just to have an idea of, is what's the amount of profit you want to make or you need to make in a given month. I've heard multiple people say, and I've come to believe it, is revenue feeds the ego, profit feeds the family. So, if you're running, you can have, 20, 25,000. Honestly, I've made this mistake with EditorNinja and I've been rectifying it. You can have 15, 20, 25,000 a month in revenue and have no profit. Like, it's very easy to do. And so that's where you need to understand, kind of what your profit margin is and what you're willing to take. Agencies are really tough. Service businesses are really, really tough to make work because you have human capital. And the market will only bear a certain, amount as well. But basically you need to say, okay, if I'm, if I want to make $10,000 a month as a freelancer, I probably need to charge 20 or 25 based off of how much I can get, basically work for, and the level of work and all that sort of thing. You're going to pay more for more experienced people, but also it's going to be less of your time, right? But there are trade-offs there as well, because if you hire a less experienced person, you have to spend more time, but you're spending your time instead of spending the dollars, right? It's a constant like balancing act. At the start, usually you're going to hire people that are more junior, and you're going to have to spend more time, and then over time, that allows you, you're then able to go and hire more experienced people that can take more things off of your plate, but you're charging more because you're having a better work output, and so you actually end up making more. You just need to keep an eye on this. I have a spreadsheet that I use where every single week, it's and every month as well, is how much cash do we collect? How much did we pay, right? To our editors. How much did I pay? How much did we pay me? What are our other expenses? And basically at the end of the month, I know, okay, how profitable were we, but I also look at like paying editors is my COGS, is my cost of goods sold. And then what's my percentage there? And I like to keep mine at like 60 to 70%, because then we have other expenses for software and technology and all that sort of stuff. And then, I like to get paid as well. So, and then I also need to keep some like cash in the business in order to go and invest in new things. So it's a balancing act across all of those. But I think the takeaway really is, pay people more if they're more senior, more valuable, and take other things off of your plate as well. And if they're just writing and they're not doing any strategy, they're not doing any client management, that sort of thing, they should be paid less than someone who is also doing some of those things. And you can over time kind of establish a rubric there and move it around. So that's kind of how I start thinking about it. And then with pricing as well, a lot of people ask me about setting pricing. Well, where do I even start setting my pricing? The way I do it is look at what is the market charging. But then that is just the starting point. To me, people will be like, all right, they're charging $1,500 a month for 5 blog posts. I'm going to go charge 1,200, right? And that's just a race to the bottom. Instead, what I think is, okay, how can I get someone to pay me 2,500 or 3,000 a month for that same like amount of work by adding on more value, or just leaning into the value that we already bring, whether it's subject matter expertise or it's ready to publish, we're going to upload it into your CMS, like whatever it is, adding on that additional value and therefore being able to charge more, you're just going to get better clients as opposed to just a race to the bottom. Because if someone's charging 1,500 and you come in charging 1,200, someone else is going to come in charging 1,100 or $1,000, right? And it's just a constant like race to the bottom. And that's where I see freelancers get into trouble. Instead, look at how can we charge more? How can we charge premium prices that better clients are going to want to and be able to pay, and the people that aren't going to be great clients, they're just not even going to consider it, and that's okay.
Absolutely, and I think with charging more in general, if you're a freelancer and you're bringing on a subcontractor, you're bringing on a virtual assistant, it should be so that you can provide a more well-rounded service and a more valuable service, right? So if you're in a position to do that, to bring on people to help you with your team and to bring in more perspective, you should be charging more, because now you're offering a more valuable service to your client, right? One thing I will say here as well is that,
and
go ahead.
I was gonna say, also in your business, if you're taking forever to send out invoices, bringing on an assistant that's responsible for sending out invoices, you're going to get paid faster. And that right there has a measurable impact. Or you can move from like negative cash flow to positive cash flow. That right there can have a huge impact. So don't forget to look for those things too.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's very important to state around pricing, and when you're first figuring this out and first bringing on subcontractors and virtual assistants, you're probably not going to get it right the first time. And you mentioned that, John, right? You're like, I'm still working through it. I'm still working through how much I should be paying people for what type of service and how it impacts my business and what how valuable the outcome is. And that's okay, right? Andrea and I, we brought on a couple of subcontractors when we were running our consulting business, and we were kind of constantly shifting, how much does it make sense to pay people? How many hours can we bring them on? What exactly should they be doing? Where are they providing the most value? How then can we provide more holistic value for our clients? It's a constant conversation, right? With any small business, any startup, you're constantly learning, you're constantly shifting, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I will say at times we found it was better for our business to not subcontract, but directly connect our client with that other freelancer and let them manage the relationship, because we weren't going to be able to profit off of offering that service, but we were able to generate a lot of goodwill with our client and with the other freelancer by making that connection, and still like holistically being able to provide these services by bringing in other freelancers and consultants. So just kind of, I would say, consider that sometimes it doesn't make sense to do the subcontracting.
Yeah.
1000%. And that's also, that's a great way, like, Andrea mentioned goodwill. That's a great way to build out your network and build out your community, is by passing off the work that you're not going to do well or that you're not going to make margin off of. And it doesn't always have to be passing off that work to a subcontractor or a virtual assistant. It could be somebody else in your community. And that's a beautiful relationship to build as well.
Yep.
Okay. Another question that we got here. So the question is, I'm based in Canada and it's not as easy to subcontract here. And I know that we are all probably not super in tune with like Canadian law, but the question really is around like hiring versus subcontracting and how to figure out which is the right move for you, right? Do you want to hire someone full time? Do you want to subcontract? Do you want to bring on a virtual assistant? Like, how do you figure out the right path?
I'm not a Canadian employment attorney, so I'm not quite sure about all of that. I'll just give you my framework for kind of how I think about this. If it is something that needs to be done semi-often, well, there's kind of, I think about it as a breakdown of what is the task, or what are the things that I need this person to do, and then what's the right type of hire for that. For example, if your business is under probably million, 2 million a year, you don't need a full-time finance person. You need a bookkeeper. You need a bookkeeper. You need an accountant is what you need, right? You don't need a chief revenue officer, like that sort of thing. But basically you hire them to do the things that they do every single month. Mine, for example, they go through, they reconcile my books. They do a little bit of like invoicing and that sort of thing. They tell me quarterly taxes are due and here's what you need to pay and this is where you send it and that kind of thing. But like would never make sense to hire someone full-time for that. Part-time or subcontractors, that kind of thing. So at EditorNinja, I'm the only person that's full-time. And I'm not even drawing a full salary yet. They are all 1099 contractors. We're based in the US. I pay them basically by the amount of work, by the amount of words that they edit and the type of editing that they're doing and that sort of thing. For my managing editor, it's a little bit different. That's hourly for stuff that he's doing, but I also kind of have an expectation for a number of documents he can get through in an hour, that kind of thing. Have a budget there that I don't really go over. So these are things that need to be done. I mean, I need these, editors to show up every single day and to do work for us. So I have an expectation of a certain number of hours, but it's 10 hours a week. And if they have more, then that's great. But I know they can get through 2,000 words an hour. And so 20,000 words, a week. And so 80,000 words a month. And that allows me to build capacity from there. At some point, it may make sense to bring on someone, full-time, like a full-time editor, a full-time account manager, or someone like that. Once we're at a certain point where it's taking enough of my time that I can then go and hire someone, full-time. So it's both the like, what is the role? Who is doing those things currently? How often do they need to be done? And then basically, can you afford to bring in that person, to kind of replace you in that? And usually I say, start off with, there are certain things like accounting and whatever, maybe even development, right? Like I will occasionally find freelancers to build out a feature for us, for the software that we use to kind of facilitate all the intros or all the assigning work to editors and that kind of thing. But I'm not going to keep a developer on a retainer. I can go to Codable and find someone to, build out this one thing. And yeah, it might cost me a little bit more per hour, but I don't have that ongoing overhead versus like a managing editor or a marketer or someone like that. Usually I like to start off with, I'll start off with freelancers that kind of I'm directing the strategy. Eventually I'll bring in someone on a part-time basis who is directing the strategy, who is managing those freelancers. And then eventually, assuming they're good at what they do, and this applies to sales or any of those things as well, kind of take it and apply it to your business. Then eventually I will hire someone full-time once their work has basically gotten us to the point where I can afford someone full-time. And it might not be that same person because they might be a fractional like marketing lead or whatever. And they're not open to full-time work. And so I'll go and hire someone full-time, but I'll get that part-time person to help me with hiring the full-time person. So I don't have to do all of that. That's a hack for you right there. But that's kind of how I think about, the type of organization or person or whatever to hire. And we could get into the like done for you, done with you, do it yourself, done for you, done with you. So, like consultants you're working and freelancers, you're working with them. DIY is obviously you're doing it, and then done for you, that's more like an agency or, an individual like senior contractor or someone like that is very much like executing on the work and not just giving you strategy. And that's important to kind of differentiate between. I actually say freelancers are the ones that are actually doing the work. Consultants are giving you strategy, but you still need freelancers or someone else, maybe you, to implement it. But then you're still also having to manage the people versus like if you hire an agency, they're responsible for, or a service like mine, they're responsible for managing the people, right? And that's also a value that you can charge for because like, we get people coming into EditorNinja that they're like, I have 150,000 words of content that I need edited in 2 weeks. There is no way they're going to be able to go and hire freelance editors that are vetted, that are trained, et cetera, to get all that done in 2 weeks. We can do it. We have the people, right? But they're going to pay us a premium because we've taken all of that off their plate and they're actually able to get it done. And they don't have to worry about any of that as well. So, that's something to also think about in your own work as you're freelancing. Like, are you customers that they are, they actually prioritize getting things done on time, or they're like, hey, if we don't get this done in 2 weeks, this client's going to fire us, and it's a $10,000 a month like client, right? It's $120K a year contract. They're going to be super happy to pay you $5,000 potentially in order to like not lose that additional like $100,000 of revenue, right? people always surprise me, and often then sometimes people will be like, oh no, I can't do that. And I'm like, well, what's the trade-off, you know? But what I find is usually people are willing to do it.
That's awesome. I know that we're about 5 minutes from the end right now, and I was actually going to ask you, which you kind of dug into just then, is like how content writers specifically can leverage Editor Ninja to expand their business, right? So I know that you have companies of all shapes and sizes that come to Editor Ninja for their editing needs.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically, I know that we've talked about previously that you have some like pretty big, or well-known names in like the content freelance space that have started using Editor Ninja to expand their business, and using Editor Ninja in place of maybe a subcontractor or virtual assistant to do certain things. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, we work with, everyone from small, like 2-person agency up to, we have some publicly traded companies as well that are customers. For freelancers specifically, there's a couple of ways. And freelancers, I'll be completely candid, we find it can be challenging to work with freelancers simply because your work can be kind of all over the place. It was the same challenge we have at Credo, and why Credo focuses on agencies, not on freelancers and solo consultants, because freelancers and solo consultants only have a certain amount of capacity, right? And so if you're able to produce 10 pieces of content a month, like as that's where you're capped. And I also find most freelancers don't actually know their numbers and know like their profit percentage and that kind of thing. And they think about like hiring a service or a contractor or something like that is like that money directly coming out of their pocket. And I get that. And I've had that mindset before. I've just been doing this for long enough that like, I just now know my numbers. But so for freelance writers specifically, there's a couple of ways. Number one, if you have consistent ongoing work, you have long-term clients, that kind of thing, you know how much you're producing, and editing is just taking up a lot of your time. We can save you 15, 20 hours a month, 2 to 3 days of effort per month, just on the copy editing, proofreading, fact checking, that sort of thing. So that can make sense for people that are producing more and actually get that, okay, I'm doing 10 pieces per month right now, but if I can get back those 2 to 3 days, I can do 2 more pieces of content every month and charge $1,000 for that, right? So I'm paying $500 to make $2,000. Totally makes sense economically, right? The other thing I tell freelancers is we have the ability for you to just order a single piece edited. So editorninja.com/single-doc / we'll get you to where you can basically price it out and say, all right, 1,500 words, copy editing, proofreading, I need it back in 2 days. You can kind of test out the service that way if you'd like to. And you can just keep on it. You'll then be prompted to create a free account. And then you can go and, just pay for documents one-off. And so what I tell freelancers is this is a great way for you if you're like, all of a sudden, something happens, your kid gets sick or you get sick or something like that, but you're like, I owe this piece of content to them in 2 days time. It's worth it to me to go pay Editor Ninja $50 to get this done so I can get it, on time, so that I don't lose that client or I'm not having to like remanage expectations or that sort of thing. As you can tell, it really comes down to what are both like it's not just the upfront costs, but it's also what are the hidden costs, right? What could potentially happen or what will probably happen if you don't go ahead and do do this thing, right? Like you don't need to commit to a full monthly subscription or whatever with us. If you want to, great, let's talk about it. But if you go to editorninja.com and click, I think it's get started up top, that'll take you to schedule a call with me. Happy to chat, even just to help freelancers solve their problems with scaling. Like I'm good at this. I'll be honest, I'm good at this. And I love talking to freelancers. So, but consider using it just for, one-off documents where you need a rush job or something like that. We've got the editors, and you don't have to go and hire them. So, we can help you out with just, when you get yourself into a bind, we're here to help.
Awesome. I love that. Well, we are right about at time. So quickly, I know that you just mentioned where people can go on the Editor Ninja website to either submit a document or get in touch with you. But outside of that, where can people find you? If they have questions after this, do they want to get in touch or they just want to follow along with you? Where can they find you?
Yeah. So to follow me, kind of like what I'm currently thinking about and all of that, the best place is on the social medias. Twitter and Threads, I guess. I'm Doherty JF on both. DOHE or TYJF is the first time I've actually gotten to say that. But I'm the same username pretty much everywhere, except on LinkedIn, but just type John Doherty and you'll find me in there. Yeah, that's really the best place to find me. Then my email is just my first name at EditorNinja.com is the best place to reach me professionally if you just want to ask like, one-on-one questions or whatever. So those are the best places to find me.
Awesome. And if you have any questions for me or the Harlow team, you can find us on really all the same social media. We're on LinkedIn, just recently on Threads, Twitter, etc. It's at Meet Harlow, or you can get in touch with me specifically. All of my handles are just at Samantha Anderl.